Okay, another part that we're going to create today is the wrench of a project that my students are working on. This is a very challenging piece. It looks very simple. You see just kind of a round, maybe extrude, some cuts, right? But you have a couple things in here. You have a partial hex, right? Because it's a wrench. It has to wrap around a hex. But if you look at the shape of this wrench, and this is the case with most wrenches, in order to improve your wrench clearance, a lot of times they're a little bit taller than they are wide. All right, so I actually have a couple radii working in here for me. And I'll show you a couple ways to make this profile. This is really the challenge here. The rest of it, you probably know how to do anyways. But it's really about how you go about making these parts in order to make it look correct. So the approach is extremely, extremely important in a piece like this. So let me move that over to my other screen so I can see all my dimensions. But I'm going to start a new part, and for my students, they have a certain number they need to use that's part of the project, matching a project number. So this is the project number they need to have, 31210-03, and then we're going to hit OK. I'm going to turn my datums on. All right, now I can go back to working on this wrench. So the first thing for sure is the wrench head itself. So I'm going to start with an extrude. All right, and I'm going to actually orient this thing where the wrench goes along my front plane. So I'm going to pick my front plane, okay, and it's going to automatically rotate for me, but you might have to click this button up here. And then I'm going to start with that wrench shape, okay, and if we look at this, if I bring it over, and zoom in on it, we can see we have a couple different centers. This arc down here, as well as this arc down here, have a center below and above. I have an arc here that shares this 1 3/16 center. And I'm certainly going to have to do some trimming as well to make this work. So what we'll do is we're going to base this on the larger center, so basically the center of the hex. So we're going to create a circle. We're going to start here, all right, and then we're going to draw this out, and I'm going to let this circle sort of dictate my scale of my view here. So I'm going to hit dimension. Because I have a diameter right now, I want a radius because it's going to be less than 180 degrees that I'm going to use. If I have more than 180, I want a diameter. So in order to put a radius in, I'm just going to pick dimension. I'm going to click once. I'm going to middle click. And then I'm going to put in my size. So this is 1 13/16. Okay, so a couple ways I could do it. 13 divided by 16. Hit enter. And then double click it again and add a 1 in. All right. Or if you know that 13/16 is 0.813, you can certainly do that right away. So I'm going to hit my space bar and zoom in. All right, now I have a couple circles I need for the remainder of my wrench. And the way I'm going to create those circles is I can see from my picture that it's actually the first one is down and over. So I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to draw it out until it's tangent, just like this. I'm going to go up above, make sure these are vertical to each other. I'm going to do the same thing, go up until I'm tangent with my outer circle. Then what I'm going to do is go to equal, and I'm going to say this circle is equal to this. Okay, so now I actually have that profile hidden in there. Okay, but we'll get to that in a second. I can start trimming now, or I could create my hex. It's really up to me what I want to do. My first thing is I want to put in the size of these circles. So this radius down here is 1.125. Okay. And then now I think I'm probably at a good point to trim. So why don't I get rid of the stuff I know I don't need? So I'll get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of that. Okay, and then I can get rid of the stuff on the inside too, for sure. Okay, and then I can also actually get rid of this arc here and this one here. And I'm going to leave this right now. I'll trim that after I put my hex in. Okay. One thing that is interesting on this drawing is that it doesn't actually indicate where this is. It says floating center. which is interesting. But we can control that in a couple different ways. So it tells me that a dimension from the outside of here to the outside of here is 3.25. All right, so I have to create a dimension by picking the outside of that, and it's very important I click over here. I still have this radius here, so I'm going to move that out just so I can see it. I'm going to move this one out just so I can see it a little bit better. Now I can create my hex, and the best way to create a hex is either creating an internal or external circle. That is a construction circle, so go into construction mode, pick circle. It shares a center, so draw your circle out. And then for that circle, it says that our radius is 0.875. 875. Okay. Now I need to create my hex. All right. Now normally, if I was creating a hex inside of or on the outside of a circle, I would do it kind of like this. So I'd go over. Oop. Sorry, I got a little carried away. I got to turn off construction mode and then pick line. But normally I would go over like this, make a tangent, make that tangent, make that tangent, and then make this tangent. And then I would complete the rest of the hex. For the interest of this, my lines just go right up to here. And even if this one doesn't go all the way there, I'm just going to middle click a few times. I can go corner, pick this, and it'll make a little corner for me. Same with this. Okay, now I need to go through and put in some of the constraints I would normally have on a hex. So I'm going to say equal. This side and this side are equal. These two would normally be equal, but they carry all the way out to the outside of the wrench. So I'm not going to do that right away. Okay. The other thing I see is now that I've done some trimming, it lost my constraint that these two are equal. So I'm going to go equal again, this circle up here, this circle down here, okay, to make sure that that's still there. Then I'm going to put some horizontals in. So horizontal, this one, okay. Now it's giving me a length for how big this is. I can control that by the opening here. So let's go dimension here to here, then middle click. It got a little unhappy with me. And why is that? Let me think about that for a second. 875. I see what I did. Jeez, I set you down the wrong path. So let's undo a few times. It wanted, that's interesting. It's giving me the outside circle for some reason. Normally when you do a hex, you want the width across flats. All right. So what we're going to do actually is we're going to create these lines inside like so. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same sort of thing. Equal this and this. All right. I'm going to do my corners here, 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 here. Okay. Then I lost my constraint again, so I'm going to go equal here, here, and dimension from here to here, and then put that in, and that'll control it properly like I was before. And that's going to be 1.5. And with any of these projects that I create videos of, a lot of times I just kind of approach it. I don't rehearse it or write a script or anything for this. So there will be mistakes here and there, or you know, just scenarios where I realize another way is better to go, because that's part of the process of learning how to do this correctly. It's part of the process of learning how to model, is understanding, okay, as I'm going, maybe my first approach to it wasn't the right way. Okay, maybe there's a better way to do it. And the way that I knew to do that circle, by the way, is a lot of times with a hex, normally they'll give you the width across flats like this, but since it's not a full hex, my drawing actually gave me my center circle right there. There's my construction circle arc. Okay, so now I've got the head of this wrench done completely. All right, so now I can hit the checkbox, and what I'm going to do is, because I know later on I have this little handle here that sits in the middle, all right, but it's not quite as wide as the head, I know I want to use a symmetric constraint because then I can keep all my sketches in the middle and just go halfway both ways. So let's go symmetric constraint, and we're going to make the thickness of this 0.75, and we're going to hit the checkbox. Then my next feature is going to be another extrude. I'm going to put it on that center plane again, the front plane. Okay, and I'll start by creating a circle down here because there's a big round on the end. You know, I could create that with a round, but I don't really see an advantage to that. And the other thing I'm going to do is add this back arc as a reference because the line's going to come right up to that arc. So for that arc, I'm going to create a circle for it because I'm going to need that part of the arc for my sketch. Create that circle right on there. I'm going to create some lines that go from here straight over to there, middle click, from here straight over there, middle click. Now I've just got to do a little trimming. So I'm going to trim all this away with sound effects and trim all that away, and then I can start putting my dimensions in. So my first dimension, this is definitely a dimension I want. Alright, so my first dimension is the length. The length of this thing is 10.75. Good size wrench. And then the radius I have down here is 0.75. And that'll control the thickness of that. Now I can hit my checkbox. And again, my sketch is in the middle because we planned this out properly. So I'm going to switch this to symmetric. And I'm going to make the thickness 0.5. Then I can middle click. And now I've got that portion of my wrench done. Now the next feature is I have a little groove that's cut in here, and there's a couple different ways I could do this. One of the first ways is if I wanted to make it in the same feature, I could put a datum plate in here and cut down this. Probably the easiest way is to create it on one side and then just mirror it to the other side. I don't normally like to use mirror, but I don't see a disadvantage to doing it that way, so we're going to do it that way. So let's hit extrude, then let's pick this front surface. Alright, then I need to add some references again. So right click, references, add this. Alright, because part of my groove centers on there. I think that's all I need, just this long line, that. So we'll hit close. Now I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to come down here, I'm going to create another circle. Before I draw my lines, I'm going to make both of them equal. And I'm going to draw a line that goes from one to the other. Middle click, one to the other. Then I'm going to do some trimming. So I'm going to trim away these two lines. I'm going to trim away these two lines. Now I can put the dimensions in. So my first dimension it gives me is a radius for this, which is 7/16. It also gives me a dimension from here to here, and that is 7.25. Alright, so there's my shape. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to make it a cut, and I'm going to flip the direction. Okay, now that's certainly too deep. It tells me the thickness of the middle is 0.25. So I've got to do a little bit of math. This overall thing is a 1/2 inch, and it's a 1/4 inch in the middle. So that leaves me with a 1/4 inch for both sides. If I divide it by 2, that gives me 1/8 of an inch. So it's going to go in 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to middle click to put my checkbox in, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click that extrude. I'm going to hit mirror, and I'm going to pick this middle plane, which will mirror it to the other side, and I'm going to hit my checkbox. Okay. The disadvantage of mirror is if you mess with a dependent a lot, or with the original feature, a lot of times the dependent doesn't update properly. So if you think this is a part that you're going to make a lot of design changes, mirror is probably not the best way to do it, for sure. But it certainly works in this scenario. So now all we have left is some rounds. I have 2 big rounds. Definitely go from big to small. 2 big ones. One of them's here. Hold control. One of them's there. And those are going to be 0.5. Can put those in. It looks like all the rest of my rounds are all 1/8. So now I can go around. I've got one here, and I'm going to change my size before they all freak out on me. 0.125. I've got one here. I've got one here. That's going to go all the way around. One here. That's going to go all the way around. And then one on the inside of the pocket. One on the inside of the other pocket. I middle click. Get my rounds in there. And I am done with this part. So that's how I would go about creating this wrench. I'm going to save it. But there's certainly other approaches to making this inner portion here. But this is certainly probably the easiest way to make this piece in particular.